Hello and welcome. In today's video we will see how several weapons in Bloodborne are able to trigger a secondary backstab with the follow-up R2. In the vanilla game you have several weapons that have a follow-up R2 after their charged R2. They are the Saw Spear, the Saw Cleaver, the Ludwig Holy Sword, the Kirk Hammer and the Shikage. But none of those weapons follow-up R2 are actually able to trigger a second backstab when it connects. Whereas in the DLC you have three weapons that can. They are the Holy Moonlight Sword, the Church Pick and the Amygdalan Arm, and we will see how they work. We will start our little endeavor with the Holy Moonlight Sword in its untransformed aspect that deals mostly physical damage with only 50% of the listed arcane damage. That is a thrust on the first charged R2 and then a blunt type of damage on the second R2. On the Beast Possessed Soul you can see that the second R2 just does not succeed in triggering a second backstab into a visceral opening. That's weird because when you actually land only the second R2 you can see that you trigger a visceral with only the second R2. On the Hunter both work, as you have seen in the intro sequence anyway. Obviously you can make the most of it by slapping a beast blood pellet before you do that and then shifting to a very high percentage physical damage or thrust damage weapon on your visceral to really optimize things. The Labyrinth Sage / Madmain that works as well in the untransformed mode, so you can dispatch them in one go pretty easily with that sort of approach. Doesn't even need to land the visceral anyway. They don't have many HPs. The Watchers unfortunately seem to be impervious. You cannot open for visceral on the second. The normal goons, that's the same with an unupgraded Moonlight Sword. In an FRC you can see that you cannot open it. And finally the Brain Sucker are good clients for a second opening, even though they are already dead in the second hit anyway. The Holy Moonlight Sword, once transformed, reduces a bit the scaling of the damage from the physical and boosts the arcane damage from half to 100%. The charged R2 and follow-up R2 is infamous. It deals a massive amount of damage, and when you test it on a Hunter with a beast blood pellet, you can see that you cannot really quite dispatch and kill the Hunter in one go. It has about 3,500 points, hit points, and it doesn't quite cut it, hence the advantage of using its untransformed version. But that's interesting because when you miss on purpose the first R2, the second actually opens for visceral. Sadly, whenever the first R2 connects, it always fails at triggering visceral after. The Amygdalan Arm is another of those terribly efficient weapons from the DLC that allow you to have a follow-up R2 after the charged R2. But only its untransformed mode can do that. And you can see that only certain mobs, again, will be susceptible to it. The Beast Possessed Soul is not susceptible to the second R2 to open for visceral, but Hunters are. The transformed version, though, is not able to there are two follow-ups to the charged R2 in the transformed mode, but it does not allow to trigger any visceral ever. On a Madman it works. On the Watcher it does not. This character, by the way, is blood level 76, so only 28 strength and 18 arcane, so it's not like the most insanely damaging Amygdalan Arm you can think of, but still pretty damn decent, as you can see on previous footages. This one is not upgraded. It doesn't work on average goons, and it does work on the brain sucker. But then again, your brain sucker is gone anyway with the last R2. And finally, the church pick with its charged R2 and follow-up R2 is also a force to be reckoned with, because the modifications, as you can see, is about 200% of the listed physical damage, and it's all thrust, so it kind of stings. You can see on this character it's really optimized for an insane amount of damage with 32.6% thrust and so on and so forth. So it works on the Beast Possessed Soul, plus it's a character that has 50 skills, so of course the viscerals are cosmic. But yeah, it works on those guys. It does not work on hunters, which is basically the only real use of those double follow-up R2 that opens for visceral. It's really to dispatch those extremely resilient enemies rather than just the ones that you kill with the follow-up R2 anyway. So for your madman, it works just as all the others did. The Watcher again fails, so on the Watcher it never works. None of the three weapons actually manage to open for visceral on the follow-up R2. On the goons, it doesn't work. This is an unupgraded church pick, obviously. And finally, on the brain sucker, it fails as well. So today we have demonstrated that the Holy Moonlight sword in its untransformed state, the untransformed Amygdalan Arm, and the transformed church pick all share this very specific feature that allows to open for a second backstab on the follow-up R2 after the charged R2. The Holy Moonlight sword and the Amygdalan Arm essentially affect the same enemies the same way. The Beast Possessed Soul is not affected by their secondary backstab, but Hunter and Madman and Brainsucker are, whereas Watcher and Goons, like your basic Phthumian dude, is not affected. Interestingly, the transformed church pick actually opens for a secondary visceral on the Beast Possessed Soul, but not on Hunters. And the Madman still is affected, but the Brainsucker somehow isn't. Watcher and basic goons still are unaffected. This secondary backstab feature is obviously very useful, mostly for hunters, because they are the ones that in the end have enough HPs to withstand your normal string of damage. As we've seen, the transformed R2 and follow-up R2 of the Moonlight sword, for example, is not enough to kill the hunter, at least not on my blood level 100. Whereas the opening for the secondary visceral after the first visceral using the untransformed Moonlight sword, for example, allows me to deal over 3,500 points of damage, which allows me to kill the hunter in one go. So with that in mind, well, have fun with those weapons and this specific feature, and see you later. Bye.